Good evening, this is Eva. Tonight I'm going to be talking about female narcissists, and it's going to be more like focusing on mothers and daughters. And I'm going to go back to Jezebel and her daughter in the Bible that we were doing before and finish that up. But before I do that, I want to go to Germany, and we're going to talk about the origin of the Snow White story. Okay, so there was a lady in Germany in the 1533, I suppose. So when she was born. So maybe this happened 1550, because she had to at least be a little older. She had a stepdaughter named Marguerite who was beautiful. Well, they were both beautiful, but obviously the daughter was younger. And the daughter was, I believe, 15 at the time. The average age for marrying was supposed to be 14 at that time. But not this story, but the next one I'm going to tell you, they had child brides of age 7. So that's almost sounding like a cult or something. But anyway, this German countess, she had a big position on the court at the palace, and she had a lot of political clout, and she really couldn't stand her stepdaughter. So she sent her to Brussels, and when she was in Brussels, Marguerite met the King Philip of Spain. She met his son, and they fell in love and had an affair, and they wanted to get married. And then when the stepmother found out about this, both she, I guess the girl's father, and Philip, the actual king, were all against it. So then mysteriously Marguerite died from a poison that later got said was in an apple, but I think originally it was possibly another route. I don't know if it was like by drinking something or eating something, but they wanted to get rid of her because of her relationship with somebody from another country, and they were trying to form certain alliances through marriages, which noble women at the time had children. When they had daughters, it would be like a really big deal because the daughters would be used sort of as like political, what do you want to call it? Like they could move strategically through their status by using their daughters as basically, their beauty, so that they could procure offers from noblemen of other countries or their country that would put them in better positions. So there was a lot of rumors of like things happening to the girls if they, basically like daughters were poisoned randomly and like based on randomly, like different circumstances, and it was all kind of during this period. And this is the period where the folk tale of Snow White started getting told verbally, because at first it was just among rural peasants that the story was told. And then later the Grimm brothers polished it up and made it into the, famous Disney story that we know of. But it originates from this. So anyway, the weird thing about this countess is, the stepmother of Marguerite, is her brother actually owned a mine in the, I don't know, what do you call it, the village she came from. And the mine employed young children, both boys and girls. And the age that they usually started was 7 years old. I'm not sure how far they went, but basically they had poor children as mine workers because they weren't like, they didn't have equipment or money. I don't know. They didn't have whatever you need to like make tunnels so that it was easy for grown men to go down in there. So they actually had child labor because the children were small enough to squeeze in there, even though they would get illnesses. Their pallor of their skin would be poor because they wouldn't get any sun, and then their backs would often have like spinal curvature problems because they would be compressed in those tight areas. And so actually the whole thing where Snow White comes upon a cottage and it's got the 7 dwarves, they're actually fashioned after these children of the mines, because the children of the mines would end up living in like I don't know, they're not like orphanages. They would be like dormitories or small houses type situation in a cluster where the children would all live together. They wouldn't go back to their parents because every morning they had to go back to the mine. So that's kind of the idea of where the 7 dwarfs came from. Now Snow White herself, in the there's another story that's related to this, where there was a, well, it's kind of, okay, this is where the violent stuff comes in. Okay, it's a noblewoman who she actually hated her own daughter. Not, it wasn't a stepdaughter, it was really her own daughter. And she hated her because she envied her. I don't really understand this, because it's like, well, obviously your daughter is going to look, you know, have similar features as you, unless they take after their father or whatever. And they're going to be younger than you. So it's like, I don't understand why, like, these women of a certain age, I don't know, am I that certain age? I don't know. Why are they comparing themselves to some age that they can never be? It doesn't make any sense, but I guess it was super real for these people, and they only had one standard of beauty, so, you know, whatever. So anyway, this story's crazy. So, and this really happened. So the woman, I'm not going to look up her name. I'll just call her Countess. She actually tried to have her daughter murdered, and then it didn't go the way it was supposed to, but somebody brought her back. She wanted the liver and the lungs of her daughter, and then she had them boiled, and then she ate them. And the reason she did that is supposedly the lungs were supposed to have the breath of life in them, or the breath of her essence, I guess. And the liver was something about regenerative, something about, again, it's about the vitality of her. And that got written into, with, when the Grimm brothers heard this story, there was a manuscript written of it, but the original one in German had the word Mutter, which means mother. So it was not a stepchild. It was a direct biological child that she had killed. And in the Snow White story, there's 3 times that the what is she called? The Wicked Queen? I don't remember what she's called. Where the queen dressed up as like a old peasant lady with like, I don't know, she had like a cape or shawl or something. And then she went around peddling things. Now, the first thing she gave Snow White in the actual Grimm's tale was she was given like a bodice, like I guess you'd call it like a corset. And then when you tighten the strings, it would, the poison would go, I don't really understand it, but somehow the poison would go into your, maybe it would seep into your skin, I don't know. But in the story, the dwarves come back from their shift and they hurriedly unlace it, and then she's free and alive. Okay, so then the second thing is a comb that's poisoned. So, the reason that's important is because one of the rituals, or I guess a ritual is the wrong word, one of comforting, repetitive type activities that mothers and daughters do together many times in the evening back then would be to have the mother brush out the girl's hair. So that is symbolic of the poison comb. So same thing happens. The dwarves somehow get it out of her hair, and it hasn't, I guess, gone into her scalp enough for her to have died that time. Now, the last time is the most interesting because there actually is evidence of apples being used. Like, seriously, this was actually happened out of like in real noble life. They would have a poison fruit. They called it, oh my gosh, the Judas fruit. Like, get it? Like Judas from the Bible, like who betrays Jesus. Okay. So the weird thing is the apple would be in the folktale. I don't know if it was the same, like when they would actually give these apples out. I don't know. I'm not sure how if they would be killing off like one girl or multiple ones, or there was enough girls of a certain age, which actually we're talking about age 7, because this story is different. They're not 14 like the other story. Of them being given a bowl, and in it would be apples, and one side of the apple is white and the other side is red, and the queen peddler lady in disguise would eat the white side, and then she would hand the rest of it to Snow White. Why you would want to buy a piece of fruit that someone stranger is eating off of, that part I don't understand, but that's the only thing that works. She actually fell into like a coma, and one of the things that they would find in the autopsies of these girls would be that their system had been undergone paralysis. Their eyes dilated heavily, almost like they were on drugs, and they would go into like a coma before, I guess, suffocating and dying on themselves, I suppose. So, gosh, I keep saying so Snow White in the original folktale, that's what happens to her, and then the dwarves can't wake her up, and she gets put in this glass casket so everybody can see her, and I guess come look at her. She's so, I guess, beautiful, which, this is another part I'm not understanding. It's like, I've been to open casket funerals because my family on my dad's side's Catholic, and I mean, I find it really morbid. I don't like it at all, but it's like, it's like, dead people don't look like a sleeping live person. I mean, to me, it's grotesque, but this is me. But anyway, I guess they thought it was lovely. And so this actually was a thing that they did during those periods of time. And they did it on purpose because they would want people to come see. I guess they would dress them in something that was like appropriate for their whatever level of court they were in, their status or lineage or whatever. And so they would want it to be clear that this was part of their bloodline, this child. So there's just like a lot of significant things about lineage and bloodlines in these stories. So here's where it gets really weird. Okay, so instead of the prince coming, which is what's in the story, right? In the real tale, the old wives' tale, they actually, the guy who comes is not a prince. He's actually somebody interested in funeral stuff or something to do with, he's some kind of, like, he's almost like a Frankenstein the scientist type of person, and he comes to get her and have her carried out. He purchases her or something, and it's because he wants to use the dead body for his, I don't know, his work. And so yeah, that's romantic, right? And then in the story, the dwarves, I think, are carrying her. Yeah, that's right. But this is weird because it'd be like minor children who supposedly have back problems. But anyway, so in the story, as they're carrying her across the grassy knoll, they hit a bump or something, and then the piece of the apple that was poisonous is lodged in her throat, and it pops out, and she wakes up. But in the real story of the old tale, that didn't happen. So that's just an American version of, or the Grimm brothers. All right. So this was also a, like I said, a practice that happened with more than one girl. This was, it was almost like they were considered like, when they have like honor killings in foreign countries over girls and their dowries, and like if they, if the family feels that they're being, their reputation or like whatever the union that they've tried to broker through, what do they call that? Arranged marriage is going to make the family look bad, then they kill. Like in India, I know they actually have done things except set the girls on fire. But like in this time period, like that was like these girls would mysteriously all be poisoned in different ways, and that enough of it happened where it wasn't just a random incident, it was like a thing. So, and it's been documented, and so that's where the Snow White story originates from. And it's very dark. So obviously, one would wonder, like, what would cause a mother, especially a biological parent, to do something like think that this was, because it's the opposite of what a mother is. A mother is supposed to be somebody nurturing who, promotes the health and welfare of her child, not the opposite. So, and that all ends up, and then like when I did research on it, it's like the thing that kept coming up was like, well, it's their status, they're trying to, or they want to be the beautiful one, like to get married off. It's like, well, wouldn't they be marrying like would that be like a different aged man or something? But I guess like back then they would broker a lot of deals where like the men would, much like a lot of these honor marriages or whatever they call them in history and culture. And, a lot of times the men are ridiculously older because it's all about money and power. Anyway, that's that. But I'm just bringing up the question of what would be the motivation? I mean, could envy or jealousy or greed or desire for power and influence or to be seen as somebody of a certain rank, could that truly like motivate somebody to do that? Or like, I mean, would they have some sort of personality disorder or some kind of mental health disorder? I mean, that's not normal. Like, there have been many instances, like in modern times, that I know I've read on news or seen on the news about whenever there's like an actual purposeful killing. I'm not talking about like shaking baby or something where it's like it's something that they didn't mean to do. They just were, out of control. But usually it's seen as like a woman who is having visions. God told her to do it. It's usually like somebody like schizophrenic or who has, or in a manic episode, somebody who has like hallucinations, or, you know what I mean? Like they're otherly directed. It's not like a calm, cool decision. So that's why I bring up the, alternative reasoning. So, yeah. Okay, we're gonna switch over to more violence in women. So we're gonna go into the Bible story of, I was talking about, I think the last time, I was talking about Jezebel and Elijah. Yeah, they were having like a huge sort of, I don't know what you want to call it. Like they were bitter enemies over what needed to be done in that King Ahab, and like the ruling class versus God's prophet, and what was best for the people, the Israelites. And of course Jezebel was totally into false idols, and she did not believe in the Judeo-Christian God whatsoever. She had Baal, the ones that she brought from the land that she came from, and that was the God that, they had erected a whole, they had churches devoted to it, and there was some fertility goddess that she was obsessed with too. And there would be offerings all the time, and all their prophets, I think they had up to 450, because I don't know, there were all these locations, and that was her sort of influencing on her husband, King Ahab. So I guess there was talk, what I had talked about before is like, well, if we were giving them, imaginary diagnoses, because we're just using them as examples, what would they be? And with Elijah, he's actually supposed to have been stricken by, she had a letter given to him by servants saying that he was going to be murdered outright for having her prophets killed after the whole thing where he tried to build a fire, and his fire, I've told this story before, his fire actually, when he asked the Judeo-Christian God, it even though there was water all over the wood, it ignited. But then when she had her prophets with Baal, and like nothing happened. So then he had those prophets killed because they lost the it's not a competition. They lost the contest or whatever. And then the drought ended and rain came because God gave rain after all that. So, but once she had the gift, I don't know if it's a gift. She had sorcery. She was deeply into sorcery, and I don't know if you call it dark magic. I don't know what you would call it. But so she actually had something to do with the letter. She had a dark spirit actually enter. She had conjured up a spirit, a demonic spirit. So like when he read the letter, it would infiltrate him, his mind. And so it wouldn't be like, and then eventually he flees right away. He runs for his life. And which is actually kind of out of character, because usually Elijah in all the biblical summaries, he's always standing up for God, and he's really doesn't seem to be too afraid of Jezebel or Ahab. He's just always like challenging them, and he doesn't ever have a problem like standing up for Israelites and making bold statements in front of everybody, and even if his life is threatened. So this was kind of strange. It's like he just runs off, he runs away, and he runs far into the desert, and he ends up collapsing at this like tree with a rock, and then he falls asleep with his head on the rock, which I always thought was weird. And God sends an angel to him because he is praying. Before he fell asleep, he was praying to God that he wanted God to kill him, to let him commit suicide so that he couldn't take it anymore. And then that could be seen as suicidal ideation, although that's like his first and only encounter where he's talking that way. And he's been through, this is nothing compared to all the other stuff God's had him doing, like all over the place. He's been dealing with all kinds of, basically his job just is, I don't know, it's like the worst job ever, like basically all the time. He's been walking around from like kingdom to kingdom in his sandals in the desert, like during a drought for like 3 years. So it's like, God's always telling him, go over here, go give these people a message. Like he's always doing everything hard. And then he ends up like even going to a village, and God has him ask a widow who she's having her last meal, her and her son, because they're out of food and all they have is a little tiny bit of oil. And Elijah's supposed to stay with her and her son, which it's like, well, if you want me to have subsistence and then be able to fulfill your mission, why would you send me to this widow who has like absolutely no food or anything to help me, and like she's on the verge of death? But what ends up happening is she makes bread. He tells her that the Lord has told her to make the last loaf of bread, and as she's doing that, the jar fills up with more oil, I guess, to make the bread, and water, and the dough regenerates. So she's able to feed him for days and days, and her and her son don't die. They end up living because of this. So it's like, what I'm trying to say is like, Elijah's always going through stuff. Like that's just a normal day for him. So this wouldn't be anything. And he's stood up to Jezebel and Ahab like multiple times. This is like, he usually doesn't take her very seriously. he listens to her, but doesn't he doesn't usually show fear, or he doesn't usually back down to her, even though she's very wicked, very loud, and as I said, she's has this kind of dark sorcery type stuff going on in the background as well. So this would be like, it could be seen as like, does he have depression? Does he have some kind of suicidal ideation? But since we know that he was for sure, because it says in the Bible that he was for sure infected by, a parasitic dark force. So he has a spirit of Jezebel on him, I guess. And like later, that phrase is now, it's very popular, that spirit of Jezebel is there's like Leviathan, Jezebel. There's even a spirit of Delilah. There's many spirits, but the main ones are Leviathan and Jezebel. So I wouldn't say that he had anything other than, dark forces in him. Because it mixes up his mind, and he is not, like, after he eats and drinks with the angel, ravens come and give him meat and bread, and he gets water, and he sleeps, and the Lord doesn't have him do anything. He lets him rest and kind of recuperate from all this, and then he gets better. So now Jezebel, she definitely has enough of the criteria for all kinds of things. Psychopath probably, but because she's very like, psychopaths are known to be very sort of cold and calculating, and they usually make plans way ahead of time. So do Machiavellians. So I'm talking about the dark triad. They plan ahead if they're going to hurt somebody, and it's both psychopaths and Machiavellian are known to do this, not sociopaths who always do impulsive violent acts. They rarely ever think of the consequences or plan it out at all ahead of time. It's usually always like a crime of passion or a crime of sudden opportunity. I don't remember what they call that, but so that would be one of her possibilities. The other would be to be a malignant narcissist, would be, which is the dark triad, because she does plan very meticulously the death of the guy who had the vineyard that they killed him for. They had him stoned to death because King Ahab went and asked him if he could have the vineyard, and he said, no, it's been in my family, and the Lord has declared that it has to stay in my family. Like, I'm not allowed to give it up for anything. So he has him murdered, and then he takes the vineyard. But then as soon as that's found out, like why that happened, and he's dead, then Elijah just shows up, and the Lord curses them, and Jezebel supposedly is going to be eaten by dogs, and then King Ahab is going to be killed in battle, and that does happen like shortly after that. I think his sons might die too. I can't remember all the details, but so that could be her with the dark triad, the malignant narcissism, I would think, because she's really far gone, and she has a lot of those traits. In terms of King Ahab, he's more like, I find him annoying. He's more like, I would say he's more like a covert narcissist, because which they also, I think they also call that like, I want to say nurturing narcissist, but that phrase doesn't make any sense. It's some word with an N, No, wait, what is it? Vulnerable. No, it's not N, it's V. He's a vulnerable narcissist, which they also can call them covert. Vulnerable or covert narcissist is the term. And that would be the type of narcissist who would really always be in victim mode, always never take responsibility for anything, never take accountability, always flip it to be the other person's fault, and constantly that victim mode, which is exactly what he does when it comes to the vineyard, which he wants. Like he's king. Like, instead of coming back after the vineyard guy says no, he doesn't like make a decree and just go and take it, which he could because he's king. Instead, he like goes to bed for several days and he's just complaining about it and he's just very like running his mouth about it. And he goes to his wife because he knows how she is and that she's better at planning stuff than him, and she's also more ruthless and cruel. And so as soon as he tells her that, it's his problem solved because she takes the whole thing over and does it. So I would definitely say vulnerable narcissist with him. And I think that's all I'm going to go into tonight because I'm already almost at time, but I did have some definitions here I might look up. Envy. Okay, so envy occurs when we want something that another person has, whereas jealousy is when we fear losing something, like example, a relationship or a valued part of a relationship that we already have, and we're worried about someone else taking it over. So those are the differences between envy and jealousy. And I think I talked last time about comparison. Jealousy is not a singular emotion, but rather a cognitive evaluation in response to feeling anger, sadness, and fear. In other words, we think jealousy in response to how we feel. Whereas I think envy is actually considered... envy is... I'm envious. Okay. It's either attraction. We want physical attractiveness, romantic attraction, or social popularity, or wealth, financial status, or lifestyle, or competence. We want to be more intelligent, more knowledgeable, seen more in the public as desirable than others. So envy comes with hostility. I want that, and I don't want you to have it. I also want you to be pulled down and put down so that I am above you. Okay, that's the difference. I want that, but you can... Okay. Whereas jealousy is not so much about... Jealousy is more about getting the object back, getting the thing you want back, the thing itself, and not so concerned with the actual person. With envy, it's like there's also a dominant factor. Okay, well, I'm going to stop there. All right. Cheery topic, I know.